The family of a local teenager says she never would have left home without calling.
Just praying for the best. I want my daughter home, man. And if she can't come home, I just want to know where she's at.
These posters around the towns of Livermore and Jay beg anyone with information to come forward. Posters that Richard puts up every spring, never losing hope.
Tell me what happened to my daughter. Just look me in the eyes so I can see her.
An arrest in a nearly 4-decade-old cold case. Thanks to cutting-edge DNA technology, the arrest happening exactly 39 years to the day
when Parabon Nanolabs used that sample to create 3D models of the suspected killer's face.
It's heartbreaking. We miss her, and we're going to find her. We're going to keep looking till we do.
It's like a never-ending nightmare. It doesn't end. It keeps returning and coming back.
What if I told you on March 17th, 1995, 6 Canadian teens all go missing at the same time?
What if I said police believe they stole a boat from a marina, went out into Lake Ontario, where they met their demise?
What if I told you the only evidence found was a gas can reportedly from this boat? No bodies, no clothing, no boys.
Welcome back to Locating the Lost, Season 1, Episode 8, The Lost Boys of Pickering. I'm Travis.
I'm Jeff. And tonight, we're speaking with Bruce Rickets, a private investigator who's been working on this case for free for the last 8 years to help the families involved.
So, I'm here with Jeff. He does this with me. His name's Jeff Atwood. So, Jeff, this is Bruce.
Nice to meet you, Bruce.
Sir, how are you?
Good.
Good. You guys staying indoors down there or what?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's just me always.
I actually
state of being.
I actually live in my basement, so I'm safe here.
Yeah, I live in my basement too, my wife says.
Yeah, that's where my office is, in the basement.
Yeah, mine too.
I think they planned it that way, Bruce.
Yeah, my wife actually has her office upstairs in the upper section in the loft, so with windows and everything.
Wow.
She gets to see stuff?
Yeah, I got a blank wall, I should say, and a couple of pictures. Well.
So, if you could start off with introducing yourself and then let us know what kind of got you into this.
I'm Bruce Rickets. I'm a private investigator here in Ottawa, Ontario. I've been involved with this case since 2012. At that point in time, a friend of mine who happened to come from the Pickering, Ontario area brought this case to my attention. And I was writing at that time. I had a website called Mysteries of Canada, and I was looking at this purely as a mystery, trying to figure out what's going on, bringing the information to the internet. And as I got further into the investigation, it turned into I can't think of the best way to describe it. I guess it's a passion of mine now. I've been working on this since 2012, so 8 years of dealing not only with the issues, but also dealing with one of the families of the missing boy, or the missing boys, I should say. And it's just spiraled from there. So at this point in time, I'm hated by 3 police departments and a coroner's office for asking too many questions.
Wow.
Yeah, that tends to happen, I think, in these types of cases when people start asking the wrong questions.
Yeah. Well, this case is... Yeah, this case is 25 years old. And, I've been involved in it now for 8 years. But, it's a cold case. But every time that you turn around and you ask questions of the police, they say, no, it's an active case. To which I point out to them, the only reason it's active is because I've been asking you guys questions and filing access to information requests now for 8 years. You're really not investigating it. It's open because I forced them to open it.
And they won't give you any answers about it.
Well, they respond obviously to the request for information under the laws of the FOI laws here in Ontario and Canada are a little bit more stringent than they are in the United States. It's a requirement that you pull teeth and gnash your teeth at somebody to be able to get the information. And when you do get it, it's heavily redacted. So they leave out names, they leave out testimony. You get very, very little information in an access to information request up here, which is why I'm actually re-examining this whole thing from the very beginning. And I'm planning on taking the police forces to court to be able to force them to open up their reports to us, because, quite frankly, it's a 25-year-old case and they're not doing anything but it. So somebody had to.
If they're just going to sit on it, right, why not hand it off or give off some of the information to someone else to give some insight or look into it a little bit deeper, right?
Yeah. They have an interesting take on cold cases. If you ask them what it's going to take to reopen a cold case, they say, well, somebody has to come forward with new evidence to compel us to reopen a case. But the problem is, if you don't know what evidence they already have, then what constitutes new evidence?
Right.
And that causes, you're sort of in a catch-22 running around in circles.
So if we could, just for the people listening, if we could kind of start at the beginning of the story, and we'll, talk about everything that any official that they say happened, and then we can hop into, follow-ups and, theories on kind of what happened, I guess.
Yeah. So it was about 1 o'clock in the morning of March 18th, so March 17th being St. Patrick's Day. There was a party going on, and the 6 boys were at the party. Chad Smith, Danny Higgins, Jay Boyle, Jamie LaFave, Michael Cummings, and Robbie Rombold. Of those 6, 5 of them were from the Pickering area. Jamie LaFave was actually from Toronto, so just a bit further over. I think, if I remember correctly, and I'd have to take a look at my notes on this, but the 3 boys that they were seen were on the tape was Danny, Chad, and Michael.
Okay.
But I can't say that for 100%. I'd have to go into my notes and look.
All right.
They decided to leave, and they told their girlfriends they were going down to the marina to quote-unquote goof around. They never returned to the party, and that was the last time anybody ever saw them. The story is that they went down to, or the speculation is they went down to the marina. There was a videotape of 3 of them going into a boat to steal beer out of it. And then they took the beer, I suppose. Either they drank it or they took it with them. They stole a imitation Boston whaler boat and went out onto Lake Ontario, where they supposedly drowned. And at that point, that was the last time anybody saw them. And there was no bodies floating up. There was no boat. There was no evidence, nothing to indicate that they, in fact, had drowned on the lake. But that's what the police decided was the determination.
So, are all 3 listed as missing? I thought I read all 6. I mean, I thought I read somewhere where only 3 are reported as missing.
Well, the interesting part about it is all 6 of them are obviously missing, but in the RCMP database, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police database, only 3 of them are listed as missing. There's no mention of the other 3. I think that's a clerical error, but it's certainly if you want to be a conspiracy person, I guess that means something. I'm not a conspiracy person, so
right.
I figure that it might just be a clerical problem. So let me continue on with the story. So since the boys didn't come back at about 2:30 in the morning, 2 of the girlfriends went over to the police department and reported that the boys had left the party and had not come back, and that said that they were concerned. The police officer at the time basically responded, well, there's nothing we can do about it now. Have the parents come back in the morning. If they haven't returned, have the parents come back in the morning, and we'll file a report. End of conversation.
Wow.
End of story. They actually didn't begin to even search for the boys for 18 hours after the disappearance, or the last time they were seen. So it took them a day and a half to begin the search. The search included the police department, the Toronto Marine Rescue Group, the Royal Canadian Air Force. They had an an aircraft as well as a helicopter, as well as the police, obviously, and literally hundreds of people walking the shores, just regular people, trying to find any type of artifact that may have been owned by the boys, bits of boat, hats, anything that they could find, and there was nothing found. The police finished up closed the rescue, the search and rescue on that after 48 hours, and basically concluded that the boys must have gone out in the lake, fallen overboard, died of hypothermia, sunk to the bottom, and never to be seen again.
So how does that happen when a body goes into the water? Doesn't it typically, upon decomposition, float to the top?
Well, that's a complex question. I'm a cold water scuba diver, a certified in cold water rescue, actually. And I do know that a body could sink to the bottom, and if it was extremely cold, it may be held down, not to bother coming back up. But I have a little problem. Oh, by the way, the depth and the coldness of the water, because don't forget this was March,
right?
And that water is cold to start with, so it was cold at that point in time. But the decomposition, the body doesn't break down that quickly in extremely cold water. But my problem with it is all of this could happen to a single body, but I honestly don't understand how it could happen to 6 bodies.
Right.
If the kids they're at that point in time were wearing baseball hats.
Right.
No baseball hats were found on shore. The boat was quote unquote unsinkable, although there was some issues with that. But the boat was never found. So, where's the evidence that they drowned in the lake? I don't know.
Right. No hats, no shoes, no
hats, no
nothing.
shoes, nothing. No
boat, not even the boat. Like that seems to be one of the biggest parts of this, right?
And there's also a water bike, I guess they call it.
Yeah, it's a water tricycle. I think that's really not a piece of this puzzle, actually. In the end, I think it's possible that the tricycle might have been stolen, maybe taken on a bit of a joyride. But I don't think they would even in a drunken state. I don't think any of these boys would ever take that thing out onto Lake Ontario. It's just not stable, and it's quite frankly, it takes an awful lot of work to be able to pedal it. So I think it's. I don't know where the bike went, as it never seemed to be found. But I don't think it really fed into the disappearance of the boys. I think it's a bit of a peripheral issue.
Okay, so that might not necessarily have been reported that next morning. That might have been a week down the road that someone noticed that they're...
No, it was reported the next morning.
That was not next morning.
Oh yeah, next morning was reported from the marina itself. There's 2 marinas there, Swan Marina, and the other one I can't remember. East Shore Marina. The 2 of them. East Shore was where the tricycle came from, and the Swan Marina is where the boat came from.
I was just googling something on Lake Ontario, try to find out how big the waves are and stuff, which they're minor waves there.
Well, actually, the night that they went missing, it was a completely still night. There was no wind going on at that time. One thing to point out is that lake is quite large. Number 1, but number 2, it's about 800 feet deep at the deepest point. So the body could go a long ways down, and in that cold water. Whether or not, problem is the bathymetry in that area is not that well known. So I don't know exactly where. The bathymetry, the depth and the structures at the bottom, what the bottom actually looks like, is not really well known in that area. It's never really been investigated.
Is it really rocky around the like the edges of it?
No, not really. The bottom is fairly there are rocks and everything else, but it's fairly smooth. If you take a look at in Lake Ontario, we have a controversy up here called the Avro Arrow, which is an aircraft that was being built in the 60s, Mach 2 aircraft that the government of Canada canceled and threw thousands of people out of work. There was a series of launches of models of the aircraft from a place called Prince Edward County. And they have been recently trying to find those models out in Lake Ontario. And if you take a look at, you can look up our Avro Arrow model recovery. You can see the bottom there, and you'll see that the bottom is actually quite silty.
Okay.
And that's pretty representative of the lake itself.
So to go back to the boat, now you called it like an unsinkable boat. And that's just the way it was made, right?
Well, I don't know if you know what a Boston whaler is.
Yep.
Boston whaler is a group of boats. They all have one thing in common, that they're made of plexiglass, but their interior is styrofoam. And if you go online to the company's website, there are videos of them cutting boats in half, and they still can maintain. Not only do they float, but they can still row them around. You can take a shotgun and blow them through the holes, and the things don't sink. Wow. Quite frankly, they're supposedly unsinkable. The thing to know about this particular boat that was stolen, though, or disappeared, I'm not going to use that word stolen too much anymore because we don't know. Right. But it disappeared. And the key there is that it was an imitation Boston whaler. It was built roughly the same way. It was a bit older. It had a couple of pinholes, or at least one pinhole in it, and it also had a cracked rear seat on it. It had a 25 horsepower engine on the back of it. It quite frankly would not have sunk very, very rapidly. It could have sunk over time. But even if it had been swamped, which is what the police think happened, it would not have sunk right away. It might have sunk over, 6 months to a year or something like that.
Oh, okay.
Oh, wow.
But it certainly wouldn't have sunk right away. It was just too buoyant.
So that's important, because you said they had helicopters, planes in the air. No one saw anything?
Well, actually, I'm still trying to get a report from the Royal Canadian Air Force. They had a Hercules C-130 aircraft on the search and rescue, and they apparently reported back a sighting of what appeared to be a boat floating just below the surface in Lake Ontario. They gave the coordinates of it, but for some odd reason, it was never followed up by the police.
Oh my God.
So I'm trying to. It's mentioned, or it's referred to in the police reports, but I'm still waiting to get the RCAF to give me a copy of the aircraft logs. After 20 years, 25 years, it's difficult to say where they are right now.
So if that's true, that blows me away. They're out there looking for these kids. They get a report from one of their searchers saying there's a partially submerged boat in the water, and they don't actually go investigate it.
Right.
Blows me away.
Yeah. So the question just becomes why, or why not? And that's the answer that I haven't got yet. Emphasis on the word yet. Now, the interesting thing about that boat, by the way, if the boat had capsized in that area, it has to be within a 25-mile radius of the marina, because that's all the fuel that they had on board, apparently. If the boat actually did get swamped out in the Lake Ontario, it wouldn't have sunk in that area because the currents and the winds in that area actually would take it down towards Rochester, New York. So if anything, they should have been looking for the boat probably on the American side and down towards the Rochester area. Cannot find anything in the files to indicate that they even discussed it with the New York police about that. So difficult to say.
Right, so that's the other thing.
New
York could have had...
Sorry?
New York could have found evidence of something, but without knowing there's a search even going on across the lake, then they're just going to disregard it.
Yeah, well, that almost happened in the case of there's a one piece of evidence, quote unquote, that was found from the missing vessel, and that was the gas can that was identified as being from that boat. It was actually located by the Coast Guard in a place called Wilson, New York. Which, if you take a look on the map, that's actually directly across from Pickering, Ontario. Is a place called Wilson, New York, and that's where they found this gas can. The reason that they noticed were piqued by the gas can was the fact that it had French and English writing on it.
Right.
So they decided that they would contact, on the Canadian side, and in fact it was identified as possibly the 99% sure that it was the gas can from the imitation Boston whaler. It had a dent in the right location, so it was being able to be identified that way. The interesting part about that is that it is difficult to understand how, first of all, the gas can got separated from the boat, because if you know anything about boating and gas cans, that they're hooked up by the fuel line by one of those bayonet mounts. So either somebody disconnected the gas can, or it broke free at some point from the boat itself. Again, haven't been able to find the gas can, so I don't really know what actually happened to that gas can. But the interesting part about it is the only way that gas can could have come from Pickering and been found in Wilson, New York, is if that boat had to towards the Toronto side. Okay,
so travel
it has to be
east.
It would have to be further west to be able to float east to be on the Wilson side. So it's difficult to say how that gas can actually got to that spot.
What are some of the theories about what happened with these boys beyond the boats, quote unquote, sinking, all 6 of them losing themselves to the water?
Well, there's 3 main theories, and then of course the 5,447 other theories that always go along with these things.
Right.
But the 3 main theories are, first of all, the police theory, which is that the boys went out in the lake, the boat was swamped, they all went overboard, they died of hypothermia, and sunk to the bottom. So that's the official report from the police department. The second one is that the boys had gone out on the lake at night. It's just like 2 o'clock in the morning or so, 2:30 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and that maybe a passing freighter, a lake freighter, had actually hit the boat, which would kill the boys and destroy the boat, quite frankly. The problem with that, of course, is that when you check the records, there was no lake freighters in that area at the time, nor were they expecting to have any at that particular point in time in that part of the lake. The third theory was that, in fact, the boys didn't die in the lake, and in fact didn't die at all, and in fact had either made it to the American side or had gone further up towards the Toronto Hamilton area and had disappeared from that point in time on. I'm not too sure of the last one. I'm not too sure of the second one either. The first one, well, that's the official story, so gosh knows what it is. There's other theories, obviously, around it. First of all, they were picked up by aliens. There's something out there called a vortex that would suck them up into the clouds, never to be seen again.
All reasonable.
How about a rogue wave?
All the most. Rogue wave. Yeah, must have been an earthquake someplace in South America that caused a rogue wave in
Lake Ontario.
In Lake Ontario.
Right. So, it's been our experience in the case that we've covered, and I'm sure our listeners would agree, that typically when you start asking questions, for some reason they never have the things that they one time had, whether it be reports or DNA samples or missing articles of clothing. Why do you think that is, that they just don't seem to be able to hold on to their stuff?
If I knew that, I'd be a millionaire. We have two perfect examples of that in this particular case. One example of it is I filed an access to information request to get the videotape that had been referred to in the police reports. The families at that point in time had actually viewed the tape back in 1995, but when I went to make the access to information request in 2013, they came back and said there was no videotape. So, why is that the case? Did they misplace it? Do they not understand what the request was? They never seem to be able to figure that one out. It's just a matter of, we had it, we don't know where it is now.
Yeah.
Same thing with the gas can. I've been trying to get at a minimum a photograph of the gas can that was found in Wilson, New York, and again, no responses to it. They don't have any photos. They don't seem to be able to find the gas can. They have an awful lot of stuff that they keep, in their lockups for evidence.
Right.
In a 25-year-old case, I could imagine it's probably not sitting, in a box in the middle of their offices. It might be in storage someplace, or quite frankly, they might have, disposed of it somehow, which causes the other problem because this is still not a closed case.
Right.
So all of the evidence really should be in existence. We had the same thing going on with the quote-unquote red pants case, which is peripherally aligned to this one. In this particular case, a description of a pair of pants that were found floating with bones in it in the Niagara River were described as red Levi Strauss jeans, denim jeans. I've forced through an awful lot of real problems, and as well as having the family come forth with a 44,000 name petition, we finally got the police to send the artifacts over to the coroner so we can get a DNA testing done. And when we sat down with the coroner said, well, they're not red Levi jeans. They're in fact not jeans. They're a parachute type of material. They're orange and they have a fire retardant on them. So the question just becomes, in 2014, the coroner says one thing, and in 1998, when the bones were found and the pants were found, the police said something else completely different. Do we have the same?
That doesn't sound like it was just, their color was off, right? It seems like they might have dug up a different piece of evidence, just pulled something kind of out of their butt, and said, oh, this is it, here you go, because we lost the original.
Well, and I can't say that for sure, but certainly there is the chance of that, and I'll give you the reasons why. The situation is that in 1998, when the pants were found, there was a measurement taken of both the inseam as well as the waist, and also in the report, the police made mention that they were Levi Strauss. They didn't just call them, denim jeans. They were referred to as Levi Strauss. Not even Levi's, Levi Strauss, full word. When I filed the access to information request for that particular report, it was heavily redacted again. But in addition to the redacted information on the thing, the name and badge number of the reporting police officer was also redacted. So I can't even go back and find out who that person was.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if you ever spoke to the investigating officer, but that answers that question.
Yep.
Jeez.
So I don't want to beat this to death as far as the boat thing, but was there reports of any gas that was stolen from the marina, so they could have gone further than the 25 miles, and that they disconnected that tank and threw it overboard and replaced it with another one?
No, there was no reports of that. None reported missing. Not to say that they didn't, but there was nothing reported that way. The interesting part about it, this is in March March 17th, March 18th.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of early for people to be on boats, quite frankly, in Lake Ontario.
Right.
The ice is off it, obviously, but it's really, really cold. And I'm not too sure how many boats were actually in that marina, and how many boats were actually fueled up or had fuel on board. That's what I'm hoping to find out in this new re-examination that we're going to go through of the evidence.
Did any of these boys have any sort of like experience on boats? Like, do we know
yes.
that?
Yes.
Okay.
Two of the boys actually were extremely good boaters and understood the safety in boats.
Mm-hmm.
When you get drunk, though, sometimes
right.
good sense goes out the window. And I'm not sure that we know if the boys were drunk at that point in time. So, or whether or not they were under the influence of maybe some weed or something like that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of questions as to what's been going on along that line too. Part of my investigation, obviously, is into the drug trade that was going on in that area at the time.
So yeah, let's talk about that some. That seems to be an all too common theme in some of these scenarios as well. People who go missing.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting. There was an awful lot. There was a drug trade back and forth between the United States and Canada because that distance is not that far.
Right.
So people were taking drugs back and forth across the border. At that point in time, it was well known that there was a drug trade in Pickering at the time. One of the things that I found in my investigation was an individual. He was a teacher at one of the high schools in the area. Interestingly enough, he'd been a teacher since 1980. He was certified and got a job as a teacher since 1980 in that area. And when I finally found information on him, I found out that in fact he had a criminal record that goes all the way back to 1980, during the time that he was a teacher. And he was finally defrocked as a teacher in 1997, I believe it was, because he was found sitting in a room with a bunch of money in one area and a whole stash of cocaine underneath this bed. And he was sitting on the bed, and he claimed that, of course, it wasn't his. Right. Interestingly enough, it's, as part of the information that I did find, it said that his driver's license was found in the bag, also with the cocaine. And he says it wasn't his. Regardless, the bottom line is that this guy was a teacher. He was also a guidance counselor, and three of the boys actually were at that school that he was at. Really? And two of them, I believe, it's possible one, but at least one of the boys actually had dropped out of school. And in order to do that, one of the things you're required to do is to go visit the guidance counselor, just to have a chat with them. So here you are dropping out of school, and you're going to see the guidance counselor, who happens to be a drug dealer, and his drug name, by the way, is the teacher.
Oh, my word.
Now, I don't know what the situation is with all that, whether or not there's a connection between the boys and the teacher. It's difficult to find the information because we have a system up here in Canada, which is not unusual. You have pardons in the United States. We have pardons up in Canada. But in Canada, the term pardon has been replaced by something called a record suspension. And a record suspension is that if you, it's a federal thing, but if you paid your bill to the state, basically, so you serve your sentence, and you have a clean bill after that, then you can apply to have your records suspended. And if it's agreed to by the courts, then your records go into some sort of black hole someplace, and I can't get access to them. The CPIC system, the Canadian Police Information System here in Canada, doesn't have access to that black hole. So if you go and do a records check on this particular teacher, you will find nothing. There is no information on his convictions. There's no information on his court records. There's no information on anything. And in fact, if he wanted to go and be a volunteer to look after kids or even go back into teaching, there's nothing to stop him from doing that because there is no record of his transgressions.
My mind. So there's someone that must have access to that, though, right? Obviously,
the only way that it ever come up is if he ever got convicted again. Then it would come up. But at this point in time, it's basically it's a record suspension. It doesn't exist until such time as it needs to come back. And I can't get access to it, neither can any of the lawyers. So it's difficult to say, what's going to happen with that. But we do know quite a bit about this guy, and we know quite a bit about what was going on down in that area at the time, because quite frankly, people know things.
Right.
So we're collecting it from the individuals rather than from the authorities.
Well, you can't get anything from them anyways, right? So
no, they won't give it to me.
I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that people say that the police were involved with that drug trade too.
Yes, yeah, that's a well-known thing in that area. That's a well-known thing with an awful lot of police forces, and not to say that Durham was the only one like that,
right?
Because I'm sure it isn't. The interesting other thing about that is that there is evidence that I've collected that said that the police had pretty poor relations with one or two of the boys in that area too, to the point where the day that the boys disappeared, one of the boys had the quote unquote shit kicked out of him by the police because they didn't like him. So there was no great love between the police and these particular boys, at least one or two of them. So maybe the police didn't do a good job because they didn't want to.
That's pretty interesting that happens the same day they go missing. But
yep, I agree.
So, I mean, it seems like a pretty obvious thing here to state, right, is it seems like it's plausible that with a teacher as a guidance counselor or whatever his title was, that, some kid wants to drop out, well, let's offer them maybe kind of a lucrative way to handle things after he gets out of school. Toss up the idea that, hey, if you want to, traffic some of this stuff for me, you can get a cut of some money, right?
Yep. So. That's always possible. No evidence to indicate that, but
obviously,
no evidence at this time.
So I want to ask you a couple questions. So Michael Cummings' mother had stated that Michael had made a strange gesture and comments to her the day they went missing. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. There was a report. Michael's mother had talked to Michael in the morning, and Michael had taken off a necklace that he was wearing, which he thought was, I gather, it was quite important to him, or a bit sentimental, and he gave it to his mother and asked his mother to basically look after it for him, and he said goodbye to her at that point in time. Don't know how that all works out, or whether or not there's a whole lot of evidence in that, but it's interesting that that did happen.
Yeah, it's interesting that happened in the case. Just kind of raises some questions.
Yeah, so in 1998, they were doing some cleaning in the at one of the big power stations up on the Niagara River. And one of the things they did find was they found two bodies that were in that area. So they were in one of the intake areas. One of the bodies was pure bones. The other one was bones encased in a pair of pants. There was a red pair of pants, described as red pair of pants, with a black belt, a pair of socks, specifically designed socks or described socks, as well as a wallet that had nothing in it. Those two bodies, sets of remains, were taken into custody by the Niagara Regional Police 17 days later, they sent the remains to the Hamilton General Hospital for autopsy purposes. I gather that was done. I've not been able to get a hold of the report yet, but we're still trying. But that was sort of the end of the case for that. At no point in time did they ever connect the bodies recovered in Niagara River to the boys that the lost boys here, because the police had decided that they in fact had drowned in the lake, and there was no way that they could possibly end up in the Niagara River because that goes against the entire current. So there's no way to for the bodies to be lost in the lake and found in the Niagara River. So there was no connection between the two cases. When we came on into the case, there was a psychic who had, and I really don't know too much about this guy or how he found out about this or whatever, because I'm not that keen on psychics. But he claimed that he saw something to do with red pants, and they turned out that these bodies had been recovered. And on the Ontario Provincial Police's website for missing persons, there was a photograph of the pants with a indication that the bones were there, and that it was an unidentified remains, basically. So I don't know how he knew about this, but he did. Maybe he
made this claim before they announced the red pants.
Right. Okay. This is actually how we got to the red pants. Anyway, we did the research on that, and in fact, I did find that there was a pair of red pants in the Ontario Provincial Police database. So I contacted the Niagara Regional Police with an access to information request about the remains, and all of a sudden started hitting brick walls. And they were brick walls they were really fun brick walls, because I have been doing this for years, and I have been doing access to information requests to police forces and other organizations for years, and I never hit one like this. They started off by saying, when I did the access to information request, I gave them the OPP case numbers, because that's the only ones that I had. But I actually gave them the date, the location, and everything else on the particular case. And I just sent them pictures from the OPP database and everything else. And they came back and said, "This is an OPP issue, so you were refusing your access to information request," even though it was well known that it was a Niagara case. So I went back to the Ontario Provincial Police, and I asked them the question. They say it's your case, but tell me about this. And they said, well, the only reason you have that case number is because that's the case number we use to be able to put it into the Ontario Provincial Police missing persons database. But this, in fact, is a case of the Niagara Regional Police. And the lady who was telling me this decided that there's an opportunity for us. She gave me the case numbers from the Niagara Regional Police. So now I had the Niagara Regional Police case numbers for these particular remains. So I went back and did an access to information request again, and they came back and said, you have to send us, with your request, you have to send us 2 government-issued IDs and have them notarized before you send them to us.
Is that
now,
a thing?
As I said, I've been doing this for years, and I'd never heard this one. So I fired an email back to them, and I said, this is ridiculous. That there's nothing in the Act that says that I have to provide you this information. And they said, well, this is our rules. So I appealed that to the Information Commissioner of the Province of Ontario, which is the next step up, and they contacted the police and said, you're wrong. So they came back to me and said, well, refile your access to information request again. By the way, every time you do this, it costs you $5. So I'm three into it now. And to go to the Information Commissioner for an appeal, it's cost you $25. So now I'm $40 into it.
Every little bit counts.
Yeah, and I don't have the information yet, and I'm $40 into it. So I refile the access to information request again, and I get a response back and said, "Oh, this is private information."
What?
To which I responded, "How can it be private information when you don't even know who the person is?"
Right.
This is unidentified remains. The word unidentified is the most important word there, by the way. So anyway, it took. I had to basically tear their back teeth out to finally get the information that I was after. And when I did, it was so heavily redacted, it was almost useless. So I finally got the information in a way that I had enough information that I could extrapolate on this type of thing. And the problem became that there was no information about the continuity of evidence. Where this was 1998, and I was asking this in 2012, and in that period of time, they could not tell me where the unidentified remains were. They told me that they had been sent to the Hamilton General Hospital to be autopsied, but at no point in time did they ever say they were returned from the hospital. So I contacted the hospital, and just to let you know that amongst the many things that I've done in my years, I used to be a morgue attendant. Mm-hmm. So I know how morgues work. I know how histology works, and I know how evidence is kept at hospitals and treated in hospitals. And so I contacted the hospital. I talked to the chief pathologist, and I said, you can't tell me about this because it was so long ago, but tell me about the policy. Would you keep that type of forensic information or material at the hospital for 14 years? And they said, obviously, no.
Right.
we would never do that. It would be sent back to the police department. Right. So anyway, we went around in circles on that with them for almost a year and a half, I guess. And finally, they decided that they had enough of us, maybe, I don't know. But they sent the materials over to the Ontario Coroner's Office in Toronto for forensic analysis to determine whether or not these were the bones of one of the boys, Jay Boyle, in this particular case.
The quote materials.
Yes, and that's where the problem came up. First of all, when we went to meet them, they had not done the DNA analysis yet, and even though this was like 6 weeks after, and the reason they hadn't done it is because they didn't get the box right away. When it was supposed to have been sent over from Hamilton, the box was delayed, and they accidentally let it slip that the reason it was delayed was that the box had gone missing during one of the renovations that they'd done at the police office, and that when they finally found it, they sent it over to the Ontario coroner.
So who knows if they're even looking at the right set of remains?
That's the problem. And without the transmittal sheets for the continuity of evidence, it's difficult to know. And the fact that they had a pair of red Levi jeans at one end in 1998 and an orange pair of flame retardant parachute pants in 2014 makes you wonder what the hell happened in the meantime.
Right.
The officer knows the difference between red Levi's and parachute pants or whatever they were.
One has to think so.
I'm pretty sure Levi Strauss didn't put out orange parachute pants.
No.
Doesn't seem like a real brand.
Well, and the interesting part is that the police, if I remember correctly, the forensic anthropologist said specifically that it is not possible that these are red Levi jeans from the 1990s. Oh, so that's pretty definitive.
Yeah.
Pretty definitive.
Did he have a date as to when they would have been?
No.
These are
no, he had
parachute pants from the 70s or something.
No, didn't say that. She didn't go that much detail.
So basically, the DNA didn't match, the pants didn't match.
Right.
Close the case, right?
Yeah, close the case for that point in time.
Right.
Now the interesting thing is that of course now the DNA of the bones. By the way, that initially they couldn't get enough sample to be able to do DNA testing until they were pushed on it, and all of a sudden they came up with the DNA from the bones. The government of Canada implemented a DNA database last year, And now it's interesting because in the United States, you guys have had a DNA database for years. I mean, years down there, but we didn't have one up here. The only DNA database that we had federally was if you were convicted of a major crime, or if it was if it was obviously a case of a homicide, then the DNA would be done and put into this database. But a missing persons case, unidentified remains, no, totally ignored.
Weird.
So now they've got this database in place, and now not only is Jay Boyle's DNA on record, but also the DNA from the bones that were tested. I almost said recovered, but I'll say tested.
Right.
Right.
So and hopefully that will help us identify somewhere in the future who in fact those unidentified remains actually really were.
Now, do we know which boy it was that was beat up by the cops? Was that Jay Boyle as well?
Yes, and that was information from his sister.
Interesting that that is his remains, nowhere near the lake, dumped off at it's a dam, I presume, hydroelectric dam or something.
Yeah, it's a hydroelectric dam, an input area.
Strange.
Yeah, who's to know? There was a body recovered in Wisconsin. I forgot the name of it now off the top of my head, but you can find it. But it was found in a field in Wisconsin, and they did a reconstruction of the body. It was just bones that they found, basically.
Right.
But the reconstruction, bones and hair they found. The reconstruction actually looked remarkably like Jamie Lefebvre, one of the boys that went missing.
I saw that.
And I tried pretty hard to get hairbrush or any type of material that might have had Jamie's DNA on it, and unfortunately we were unable to get that. No. So we were never able to compare it. But here's two situations where potentially, okay, two of the boys end up in the United States, or well, one in Canada, obviously, but in Niagara, and the other one in Wisconsin. Whether or not, in fact, they were them, I don't know for sure. But here's the case that possibly the boys, or one or more of the boys actually skipped town, if you want to call it that.
Right.
Now, I don't particularly believe this, by the way, and the reason I don't believe that is because of Jay Boyle. Jay's girlfriend had a baby shortly before he went missing. He was kind of dedicated to that girl, and I don't particularly believe that he would skip the country willingly and never come back. It's just I don't think it's in his DNA to do that. Now, that's not to say that he's not. There wasn't any foul play after he went ashore. Maybe he was disappearing for a little bit, and then met up with some foul play. I don't know that for sure, but I don't think he would purposely disappear and never, not to come back. So I don't think we're going to find out he's still alive someplace.
Right.
Just doesn't make sense.
No, it is weird that. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, Jeff.
Oh no. Well, with the remains that they you said look a lot like Jamie there. Couldn't they test his relatives, his like parents against
familial
the DNA from that?
Familial DNA, yeah. Right.
The same kind of way they do like a paternity test.
Yes, but you have to get the agreement from the family for that.
Okay, and were they not on board for that?
Not at that point in time that we were looking.
Oh, okay.
A lot of people want to move on from this.
Right.
So, from that perspective.
If these 3 bodies that were found, because there's 2 found at the dam, right? And this one in the field, if they're not involved, it's weird that 6 kids can go missing, never to be found at all. Doesn't seem plausible.
And if bodies are recovered or found, I don't why wouldn't you test that immediately to some kids that went missing there,
Well, you would think back in 1995 that they would have done a DNA testing, but you have to understand this was 1995. DNA testing was not that. It was a fairly new technique, and at that point in time, it was very expensive. Mm-hmm. So to have done DNA testing on the families, at that point in time, it's understandable, quite frankly, that it wouldn't have been done. The only reason we got Jay Boyle's DNA was that his mother had kept a piece of the umbilical cord from when he was born. And his DNA was actually extracted from that piece of umbilical cord. So his message for all the parents out there, if you can get some evidence of your children, just in case, you never know what's going to happen.
Right.
So, whether it be a hair follicle or something like that.
Yep. Now, I know I messaged you through the Facebook page about the boys.
Yeah.
Does the family know that you're talking to us tonight, and how do they feel about that?
That I'm talking to you. Well, when you first contacted me, I sent the message on to one of the sisters, and I don't know if she ever contacted you back.
No.
So the answer to your question is no, they don't know I'm talking to you right now. I don't think that they would be too upset because, quite frankly, they'd like some answers too.
Right.
Right.
Well, one of the things that I wanted to mention to your audience is that, there is now a plan afoot to re-examine this case. I want to take it back to its very beginning, and that is back to 1995. I want to be able to establish who the boys were, what the situation was with the boys at the point in time, what the police force was doing, what was happening around the Pickering area at that particular point. I want to get the baseline in place, okay? Mm-hmm. And then bring it forward. Right now, everything we've done for the last 6 or 7 years has actually been reactionary. Picked up a little information, went at it. Picked up a little information, went at it. But at no point in time have I ever gone back to the very beginning on this thing and said, okay, now let's take a look at it from the very beginning and move forward. There are people that I have talked to over the last 6-7 years that have given me information about what was going on that night. There was people at the party, for example, that had information. There's all sorts of new information out there that I think needs to be fed into the scenario so that we can really begin to understand. I need to contact, for example, the New York State Police and the police forces in and along the Lake Ontario side to be able to determine whether or not over the years they've found any body parts or evidence along that line that they didn't connect back to the missing boys case in 1995. I need to start doing all that kind of stuff and establish what we think is the actual story of this disappearance.
I would suggest you find those girls that initially took that or sent the report to the police department at 3 a.m. I find it weird that they were so concerned at 3 a.m. at that point to go see the police department, knowing that these are all kids that were drinking, to start mentioning that these kids were missing. Like, that seems odd to me. They wouldn't wait till the following day.
Yeah, no, I've got all that information already. Been collecting it for years.
Yeah.
So it's just a matter of trying to connect all these things, to connect the dots and see what happens on the thing. Yeah. So what I'm doing is I started a tip line, which is called lostboys.tipline.gmail.com. At gmail.com, so that people can send information in. I've already got to put that up yesterday, and I've already got 35 emails on that.
Wow.
People have information, or did you know this, or do you know that? And that's good because that's only a day's worth. Some of it will probably be, do you know that there was actually UFOs in the area? And I'll probably just put those off to the side. That's number one. Number two, I've got a YouTube channel that I've set up that is going to help us get video information out and audio information out to the people. You'll be able to find it if you go onto the Lost Boys of Pickering Facebook page, which is Lost Boys of Pickering, Pickering. And then the other thing that I'm setting up is I've set up a GoFundMe page to raise the funding for this, because this is going to cost some money. Right. I've been doing this now for 8 years pro bono. I've never charged anybody a cent for any of the stuff that I've done over the years. But now I have to take it to a different level. I need to get the lawyers involved. I need to get other people involved that are going to be costing money. So we set up this Facebook, this GoFundMe page, and all this information is on the Lost Boys of Pickering Facebook page. So,
all right.
And we accept American money.
Oh, fantastic! Well, I mean, it's awesome to hear that someone's out there doing this stuff. You know, trying to help these families get through this sort of deal.
Well, yeah, it's been a long trip, but as I told the Boyle sisters when I first met them, that this is a marathon, not a race.
Right.
So it's going to take time. It's going to seem like we're not going in any direction very quickly, but eventually we'll get to the point where we can say, yeah, this is possibly what happened or likely what happened, but we're never ever going to be able to say this is definitely what happened.
Right.
I don't think we'll ever do that
without any bodies. Yeah, any other information or photos or anything like that you want to pass on to us for us to share? We'd definitely appreciate that as well.
I've got a lot of crap. I can go through it and see what I can provide you. I got 12 binders worth of stuff up here. Do you want them all? And that's not including the stuff that's still electronic on the computer.
Wow.
So,
just maybe the stuff you find most important.
Okay. No problem.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it.
No problem. Okay, take it easy.
All right. Have a good night, Bruce.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
We would like to thank Bruce for taking the time to speak with us today. And if you have any information about this case, please contact the Durham Regional Police at 888-579-1520. They are located in Whitby, Ontario. Or send a tip to lostboys.tipline@gmail.com. You can also head over to the Lost Boys of Pickering Facebook page and also consider donating to Bruce's GoFundMe and help him find justice. And as always, thanks for listening.
5-year-old Taylor Williams led investigators to Alabama this week.
So we have some breaking news from Florida. An arrest has been made in connection.
After years of agony, a glimmer of hope for the family.
Investigators spent hours searching through this house off Pennsylvania Avenue.
What could be a major development in the search for missing Alabama teenager.
Tonight, a stunning twist in the search for Taylor.
Somebody out there knows something.
They want to lay him to rest their way, not by somebody else's way.